We went into the movie Venom with quite a few questions and concerns. Namely, how can you have Venom without Spider-Man? And will the movie be able to stand on its own since it's not part of the MCU? Thankfully, these things didn't detract from the movie, but the mid-credit scene was one many fans found puzzling. Luckily, we'll explain what went down once the action wrapped up. At the end of Venom, things got wrapped up pretty neatly. Carlton Drake and the alien symbiote Riot were burnt to a crisp before their spaceship could head into outer space to get more symbiotes. We saw Eddie Brock talking about getting his career back off the ground and having a pleasant chat with his ex-fiancée Anne Weying. Best of all, we learned that Venom is still alive and well, despite being so close to a fire. Eddie and Venom are learning how to coexist with one another, and Venom is learning the right time to eat people. Yep, everything was looking terrific in San Francisco when the credits started to roll. But all superhero movie fans know this doesn't mean it's time to leave the theater just yet. Of course, Venom didn't disappoint with this shocking scene. If you rushed off to throw away your popcorn bag, you missed out on a truly epic moment. We see Eddie Brock ready to report with his handy-dandy notebook, but what could he be covering? A guard talks about the FBI taking in a dangerous prisoner who wants to talk to Brock. It turns out that when Eddie bragged to Anne about scoring a cool new job interview, he wasn't just trying to impress her. The prisoner he ends up talking to is played by none other than Woody Harrelson. He's portraying a character whose name will be very familiar to comic book fans: Cletus Cassidy. He's stuck in a maximum security cell in San Quentin prison, wrapped up in a straitjacket and scrawling messages on the wall in his own blood. Cletus greets Eddie and suggests they quit the serial killer tropes and talk about what'll happen when he gets out of prison. He makes his eventual escape sound inevitable and adds that once he's free, there's going to be no small amount of carnage. Even if you're not a comic book fan, you likely guessed that this was the studio's way of setting up the sequel to Venom. In the comics, Cletus Cassidy is a serial killer who meets Eddie Brock in prison. Before Eddie and Venom could escape, Venom gave birth to a brand new symbiote. If you're wondering how this could happen, just remember that Venom is an alien life form who can reproduce asexually. Eddie doesn't realize what's going on, so the symbiote gets left behind and ends up attaching to Cletus. Having a baby on an alien planet is pretty complicated and caused Venom's offspring to be a little messed up in the head, or in whatever part of them is responsible for the thinking stuff. Its disposition was definitely not improved by fusing with a homicidal psychopath like Cletus, and thus the villain known as Carnage was born. Now, we love Venom, but he's a pretty strange character by human standards. When the good guy symbiote wants to make piles of heads and bodies in Eddie's apartment, you can just imagine what kind of mischief an evil symbiote can get up to. In addition to being outright insane, Carnage is incredibly strong and uses many of the abilities we saw Riot utilizing in the movie. He can turn himself into weapons, hurl spikes around, and is generally just about impossible to take down. In the comics, Venom resorts to getting help from Spider-Man to defeat Carnage, and even then, it's a pretty close call. Since Venom doesn't take place within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we're guessing Venom and Eddie Brock are going to have to face him alone. Well, as alone as either of them can ever be, we suppose. In the beginning of the movie, we learned that 4 of these alien symbiotes made it to Earth. One is Venom, another is Riot, and 2 of them perished before they could find a proper host. By the end of the movie, only Venom remains, which means Carnage must come from him, just like in the comic books. It's possible that instead of being incarcerated alongside Cletus, Eddie will simply get close enough with him during his interview to spread the new symbiote. Before he got to Cletus, Eddie did tell Venom to be quiet, and he actually listened to him for once. Maybe he was preoccupied with producing another symbiote. The Venom sequel hasn't been officially announced yet, but we can't see this movie not having one. Woody Harrelson himself seemed to confirm that it'll be happening at some point during an interview. Fans wondered for some time what role he'd be playing in the movie, and Harrelson confirmed he only has a small part to play for now. He stated, "I'm in a little fraction of this movie, but I'll be in the next one." Based on this mid-credits scene, it seems as if we can expect to see Venom facing off against Carnage, who will be portrayed by Woody Harrelson. In addition to this mid-credits scene, there was an excellent post-credits scene as well. Sure, we didn't get to see any Spider-Man in the movie, but this scene more than made up for it. Fans have never been as captivated and scared out of their pants by a Spider-Man villain than they are by Venom, and he's coming to the big screen. With his solo movie just around the corner, let's look into some of what actually makes Venom look over his shoulder. Before we begin, subscribe to CBR and ring that bell to join our notification squad so you never miss a video. Without further ado, let's dive into some of the lesser-known weaknesses of Venom. The suit is alive. Now, before we get started, we're mainly going to be making references to Eddie Brock, the first Venom, and that's the main character of the Venom movie that comes out this October. After Peter Parker separated with the symbiote he brought back with him to Earth, it began looking for another host and found that in Eddie Brock. The symbiote comes from an entire separate race that can copy a host's abilities. Peter found it very convenient that the suit seemed to make its own webbing and could turn into street clothing at will. So around the time Peter split from the suit, Eddie was carrying a hate torch for Spider-Man, who ended up exposing Brock as a fraud on a newspaper story. Once the symbiote bonded with Eddie, both of the consciousnesses joined to share an agenda to take down the web slinger. While Eddie Brock enjoys the partner he's gained, eventually the suit will turn on the host, and since the symbiote is alive, it eventually wants full control. This happened with Peter Parker, which eventually drove him to seek the help of the Fantastic Four to remove the symbiote from him. This isn't all bad if symbiotes are your thing. Some hosts like to feed into their alter ego to create something more chilling. Just ask Carnage or Toxin. Venom and insanity. Venom is a big baddie for Spider-Man in general, but imagine being bonded with the extraterrestrial substance and actually worrying for your own safety. The Venom symbiote is actually one of many, and during the Planet of the Symbiote storyline, it's revealed that the symbiote we've come to love and adore over the decades is actually insane. That's right, amongst the race of symbiotic aliens, the fact that it doesn't want to devour the host and instead bond with it makes it the black sheep of the family. They try to lock the symbiote away so it doesn't reproduce. But we know exactly what happens with that. However, that insanity is only a portion of what Eddie has to fear in his new partner. Just because he's the family black sheep doesn't mean the symbiote doesn't partake in bloodlust as well. As the symbiote began to understand the complexities of emotions, it also increased its viciousness. Eddie has been abandoned by the symbiote multiple times for this reason, so while there still may be some heart left in Eddie Brock, Venom has no idea what it means to have a heart. Therefore, the symbiote gives Eddie super strong bloodlust. No. So, which came first, the chicken or the egg? In this scenario, it was neither, but instead there is Null, the god of the symbiotes. Yes, there is a symbiote god. Making his first appearance in Thor: God of Thunder, we know that Null is an evil symbiote that the other symbiotes turned against. They locked it up inside of the cage planet Klyntar, until it was released hundreds of years later. Along with superhuman strength, Null has reflexes much quicker than that of a human and plenty of other alien races throughout the Marvel Universe as well. Alongside all of this, he has the ability to take remote control of whatever symbiote it chooses. This was shown by Null controlling a Tyrannosaurus symbiote and sending it on a rampage through Manhattan, leaving Spider-Man and Venom to team up to save the day. It's safe to say that Venom wouldn't have a good or easy time facing him. Anti-Venom. So we know that a symbiote can both willingly separate itself from a host, or it can be ripped away by some other means. After a while, Eddie and the Venom symbiote we know part ways, and while the suit goes out to live its best life, Eddie returns to the decrepit state he was in before Venom arrived. He was just diagnosed with cancer and began working out intensely again. After a while, Eddie runs into Martin Lee, aka Mr. Negative, and he ends up activating latent Venom symbiote particles in his bloodstream. It ends up manifesting itself around Eddie, and he dons an inverse white Venom suit, dubbing himself Anti-Venom. Along with the normal Venom powers, it has enhanced healing powers that were able to rid Eddie of cancer. However, thanks to contact with Mr. Negative, with too much use, its durability drastically drops down, making it vulnerable to destruction. Thanks to supervillain Freak, Norman Osborn was able to construct a poison that can temporarily destroy the suit. Ultimate Venom. Back in the early 2000s, Marvel decided to keep up with the 21st century by introducing a new timeline of Marvel stories with all of the normalcies we're familiar with by the year 2001. It was called the Ultimate Universe. You might be familiar if you played the Ultimate Spider-Man game or have paid attention to the MCU that takes a lot of clues from the Ultimate Universe. In this world, Eddie is Eddie Brock Jr., and after he gains the symbiote and becomes Spider-Man arch nemesis, we see a new weakness we haven't seen before: the vulnerability to electricity. As Spider-Man and Venom fought, he steps on a cable and is seemingly destroyed. But he isn't. After all, these are comic books. But it did look like Venom was a goner for a bit. This Venom also wants to be bonded to Spider-Man, whether it's Peter Parker or Miles Morales. As Miles gets his origin in the Ultimate Universe and becomes the Ultimate Spider-Man, he gets a slew of new powers along with the classic ones.
Peter Parker's most deadly dance partner is so persistent that antibiotics never work. work. This ancient parasite further improves on its chances of enduring with an open exchange of abilities, albeit to the host's fatal deterrent. Surely Venom has some fairly unique powers in the cinematic and comic universes, right? Right. Good. Something that could give up Carnage and Toxin can't be trusted. Although Venom has exhibited a capacity for good as well. Will this Terry monstrosity ever cease to amaze us? Use your greasy little tendrils to slap the subscribe button. Stay up to date in Venom's crazy, ever-changing life. You don't want to get on his bad side, do you? We am Smash for vengeance. For a story that was born from the fiery pits of hell, a chorus has to be squeezed in there somehow. Well, fear not, or a lot, depending on the fortitude of your fear limit. Hell hath spewed up something completely whacked in the conclusion of Venom number 14, Circle of 4. In a super bad turn, Flash Thompson, Laura Kinney, Thaddeus Ross, and Alejandra Blaze were all cast down to Hadesville. In order to get out of Dodge, they needed to broker a deal with Mephisto, stop Blackheart, his devilish demonic son who wants to unleash hell on Earth. The ace that is dealt is a combination of Red Hulk, Venom, and Ghost Rider.
Back to hell.
The oversized saddle to accommodate Red Hulk's gargantuan keister. Red Hulk took the reins of a flaming chopper to turn Blackheart into a fresh heap of asphalt. No speed bumps here, right? Well, Las Vegas is burning apocalyptic style like a Stephen King mindscape. Flash Thompson is now a double amputee, and Johnny Blaze needs rescuing from the chompers of X-23. A red Venom Ghost Rider tears around town during these dire events, roaring up the sides of buildings, screaming a new motto, "We am Smash for vengeance." That's music to our burning ears.
I'm the wrong guy to play hide and seek with.
Army of Arms. Venom and the symbiote kind are almost always on top of their wicked game because of their ever-adapting natural abilities, and with a bit of help from circumstance.
Yikes! Whoa! Didn't know you could do that!
One unfair advantage they have over their hosts, aka meat puppets, is a core issue. How close the symbiotes pierce the core and emotions of those that they strike up their symbiotic relationships with a slippery slope, sometimes resulting in said meat puppets' eventual madness or death. So what resource does Venom have when he, she, it is on the receiving end of a near-fatal beatdown? In a three-parter entitled Venom, The Madness from 1993 and 4, Juggernaut kicked the stuffing out of him trying to protect a new love interest of Eddie Brock's.
Don't you know who I am?
Venom is deposited into a vat containing a liquid mercury virus and rouses Spidey's worst nightmare beyond its original skill sets. And then there were 3. The virus imbues Venom with even more strength, multiple arms, and a bevy of tiny snarling faces in this roid-raging neck mountain. Sure, Venom was able to sweep the floor with Juggernaut in round 2, but the other side effects are really disturbing. The 3 of them take out a cleaning lady and attempts to violate Brock's girlfriend. Good thing it was a 1-off-3 story arc. V-Rex. Heroes and villains in Marvel's neighborhood possess pretty much any imaginable power. No matter how bizarre they gamut, don't hold a candle to this example from the Venomverse. The Old Man Logan incarnation of Wolverine has a different continuity with the mainstream canon. While the bona fide Wolverine is deceased, this Logan seems to have made more enemies than he cared to admit. Bruce Banner Jr. learns that Logan, his adopted daddy, has killed Banner and earns a walloping by Hulk Jr. Add Warren Worthington, aka Archangel's vendetta against Logan, from being the demise of the X-Men. Seems like Logan can't catch a break. Things turn from bad to terrifying as a venom-infected Tyrannosaurus Rex rears its ugly head. This is the Savage Land after all. And if you're being tailed across prehistoric America by a ravenous V-Rex, well, it's gonna be a bumpy ride to say the least. Clint and Logan are sweating bullets in this hell ride. Yes, the V-Rex is a special angle on Venom's powers, but it can handle about a ton of metal and motor oil in its gullet. This was a last-ditch attempt that Logan put into play when he drove their Ford Escape down its hideous pie hole. Fortunately for Logan, this wasn't a kamikaze stunt because, hey, well, it's Logan.
We're now part of a life force that has existed since the dawn of time. Imagine what you've turned down, Parker.
Evolution. When Charles Darwin surmised that ancient life crawled from the Promedian Slim, we don't think that he was referring to Venom and its offspring. No, evolution works differently in the Marvel Universe. In the case of Venom, natural selection seems to move forward by simply sparking the curiosity of a hapless passerby. For the uninformed, Deadpool discovered the Tari Terror in Deadpool's Secret Wars number 3 in 2015, but quickly abandoned it for Parker to find.
Hey, Oh, hello. I know, right?
We all know how that worked for Spider-Man. We too also know that Peter defeats Venom on countless occasions, forcing the symbiote to seek out new hosts. The not-so-funny thing about Venom's adaptive abilities allows him to store up a catalog of special powers via his trademarked parasitic ways.
But not only does the suit bond, in time it replaces.
This is in trade with granting the host devastating powers too, that sometimes mutate continually. Eddie Brock's probably the best example of this.
When are you gonna give a guy a break? You want forgiveness?
But what does Venom get out of the deal? Evolution, baby! As time marches on, Venom only gets better and better. Or badder and gooder? I don't know. That happened when he merged with Flash Thompson and donned a halo as a member of the Secret Avengers. Change is constant, so this benevolent streak has a shelf life. Venom is sort of like nature's platypus of the animal kingdom.
Free! Give it a rest. You'll never get far enough away.
A rip off the old block. An ancient and sentient gooey race have to be able to continue their legacy, as sordid as it is, and carry their seed into the future. Romance isn't the xenophage's forte, but on the upside, they save a lot of dough on expensive dinners and roses. Am I right, guys? The workaround to 9 months looking like a tar-coated balloon is asexual reproduction. An amazing and rare feat for something that's not a single-celled organism. And after carefully considering the lack of interpersonal skills inherent in them, and specifically Venom, auto-reproduction is the only way to go. Whether Venom left a little something behind deliberately when Eddie Brock, aka Venom, broke out of the pen is a moot point. Cletus Cassidy, the murderous and twisted sociopath and Brock's cellmate, slipped on Venom's Offspring suit. Carnage came to be a lot of trouble for everyone, including Venom.
You may be our spawn, but that won't keep us from destroying you.
The problem with these xenophage is that they don't have a solid family morals, and these latchkey kids don't have a problem retiring their parents early. We always thought it was the mother who made their young. Toxin, Carnage's child, feels just that way because Carnage despises its child. It may sound cruel, but the rivalry between these two is off the chain.
We have massive infection, multiple GPI and FSI viruses.
They're coming in from remote nodes. They're going for the Colonel.
Net brutality. There are life hacks, and then there's this. An intriguing ditty from 1995's Venom Carnage Unleashed tackles the issue of the importance of antivirus protection. And that protection is Venom. And no, it's not a McAfee product. In the then new frontier of the internet, things were very vulnerable. And the fact that Carnage has escaped from high-security mental institution to play some video games. Well, sort of. A video game based on Carnage has been released, and this is a huge security breach that can endanger the people playing the game. We can't think of any other protagonist who penetrated the web other than the Lawnmower Man or Tron, but they don't have a Marvel or DC URL. The mainframe event has Venom piercing the circuit boards to thwart Carnage's dastardly plans while being broadcast on a Jumbotron screen in Times Square. Things boiling over as Venom makes the computer overheat, defeating Carnage as well as weakening himself. If that wasn't hot enough, Dr. Pazzo's Molotov cocktail lights Carnage ablaze as he jumps through a window to his apparent death. Venom and Brock travel through the network to save Carnage in the nick of time. If you can think of any binary-powered heroes or villains, let us know. There's a rare power indeed.
You know what it feels like? It feels good. The power.
Eternal threads. Possessing an arsenal that never quits is sheer gold in the comic universe. Being embroiled in a pitched and lengthy battle requires a little extra something. And taking note of Venom's affinity with Spider-Man, this means endless webbing, a luxury that the limited webhead doesn't have. The ties that bind these two are totally Venom's doing. After all, the symbiote vampirically slipped into Peter Parker's life and garnered his webbing abilities. It's a pretty unique power in the DC and Marvel universes. Parker has to rely on web shooters, not the psychotic symbiote. Venom has all the advantages. Todd McFarlane, the legendary illustrator, spelled out this quality in The Amazing Spider-Man number 300 back in 1988. The story was Venom paying Mary Jane an unwelcomed visit at her apartment, causing her considerable emotional distress, and they hide out in a luxury hotel in the interim. But the webhead can't hide forever, as per usual. He needs to square off with the Tarface and his host, Eddie Brock. Now, Venom's endless supply of webbing is a winning edge. In the mid-stages of the heated battle, Spider-Man is cocooned in a web ball. The gravy train has its own limitations, as the more Venom uses the webbing, the weaker he becomes. So, don't get too cocky, Venom.
Come on, Venom. That's the best you've got?
Muscle car. There are a ton of superheroes that are super, as such by utilizing machines, equipment, and guns, of course. Tony Stark's nearly indestructible suit sure comes to mind. However, other non-humans don't need bloody machines. They can become the bloody machine. That's one hell of a story vehicle, huh? Venom undoubtedly can merge with damn near anything. It's automatic for him. One night, Flash Thompson, a la Venom, was tailing on foot a gang of criminals in their getaway car. They find an old junker of a car still on blocks. The symbiote jumpstarts it while giving it a new paint job and nitrous oxide, we imagine, and tear off after the crooks in this exciting addition. Hitching a ride and being fueled by a host's negative energy is one talent, but transforming an old gas guzzler in the Terror-mobile. It's fair to say being matched up with Flash Thompson pumped the brakes on Venom's mean streak, which is fortunate because a Venom-mobile peeling around town, running red lights and drifting into innocence, the cops would be hard-pressed to impound. And it's also highly unlikely that a boot would stop his wheels from spinning out of control.
What are you doing here?
Looking for a bathroom. What do you think I'm doing here? I'm here to help. Now hurry up.
Bacon Black. The Infinity Wart is a cheeky as hell parody of Spider-Man, but as a pig. The mainstay characters from mainstream comic land are reworked into anthropomorphized animal heroes. Spider-Ham and Pork Rind, informally called Ven-Ham. Ha, everyone loves bacon, especially Venomtarians. Yes, yes, and yes. Should a parody grace an entry in our list? We give amnesty to parodies with titles like What the? In this cross-species crossover with our beloved Marvel characters face their evil selves. In 1992's What the? Number 20, we get a smoky taste of Ven-Ham. If you haven't locked horns with this side dish, then snap to it. Pork Rind is blatantly inspired by Arnold Schwarzenegger, thick Austrian accent and all, and there's nary a greater ham than Arnie. We can't think of any other super ham out there that has these delicious marbled stripes. In the aforementioned edition, Ven-Ham takes on Forbish Man, Spider-Ham, Milk and Cookies, and Wolverina, and nearly takes them all down to the farm. Spider-Ham rebounds to save the day. If you're still craving some odd bacon, you can gorge on Gameloft's game for mobile devices simply named Pork Rind. Don't go crazy though, the sodium content is a killer.
Humbled and humiliated.
Losing his religious? Millions and millions of starry-eyed people have drifted to New York City because they wanted to make it there. But a city of that magnitude can eat them alive and steal their souls. If you're low on your innocence, you can always get your religion on. Venom isn't immune to this gospel. Don't worry, you're not hallucinating. It's complicated. In 1997's Venom, Sign of the Boss, number 1, the government twists the symbiote's arm. They persuade him, playing along with their agenda, and ensure this by placing a bomb in his chest. You know, for insurance. So the V-Man stakes out the pews and pulpit camouflaged as a nun. Yep, a nun. You see, the foreign leader is giving a high-profile speech on world peace. We're sure that Venom hopes that the church bells don't herald the leader's arrival. This assignment sucks all around because Venom needs approval from a field supervisor before revealing himself. True to form, the lot of them are captured by thugs and Venom eventually gets the green light. And truer to form, this results in a bloodbath and permanently afflicting all in attendance with chronic PTSD. Then Nun tries to remedy the situation by offering chocolate bars to the choir. They're too terrified to accept. What a fiasco.
Don't go! This party's just getting rolling!
How do you go from wardrobe upgrade to ultimate wardrobe malfunction to IGN's 22nd greatest comic book villain of all time? A winning smile.
Eyes.
Ooh, look at those teeth. From humble beginnings as a way to solve a logistical issue, the symbiote known as Venom has expanded to one of the Marvel Universe's most important characters.
Are you seeing this? He's achieved symbiote.
As much has been added to the time before Venom met Peter, as has after the two broke up and Venom went on a whirlwind who's who of bonding with the Marvel Universe. What's the story behind the goopy, clinging, sometimes villain, sometimes anti-hero? Let's find out. The story of Venom and eventually the Klintarians starts in a strange place, the letters section. In 1982, Marvel had a contest for aspiring writers and artists for pitches regarding their long-running characters. Make Mine Marvel fan Randy Schueller had a unique solution to a mundane, everyday problem for the wall crawler. Just how much of his days were taken up darning his torn uniform. It's not enough that he can do what a spider can and is a science genius, but he's also got to have mad sewing skills too, right? Schuller's solution was simple. There was an even bigger brain out there than Peter's, and it belonged to a man who had even more complicated clothing issues than the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Reed Richards' family and team did things like catch on fire, or turn invisible, or in Reed's case, take flexibility to a whole new level. He needed a costume that could adapt, and he approached it in the most big-brain super science way possible. He made his costumes out of unstable molecules. How does that work? Well, the molecules are unstable, you see, and don't look too far under the hood. It's comic book science, folks. It works, or Reed Richards is constantly stretching out from a fixed-size suit, and no one wants that. Schueller imagined that a time would come when Reed Richards would need Spidey to up his game a bit. And with the help of Janet Van Dyne, aka the Wasp, who was constantly upgrading her look, Spider-Man would get his own unstable molecule suit that would work with his body, making him even stickier.
I'm really strong and I'm sticky!
Ew. The backstory didn't really grab the Marvel team, but the idea of a new black suit that responded to Spider-Man's thoughts the way that the Iron Man suit responded to Tony Stark did, so they wrote Schueller a check for $220 for the idea. Fast forward to 1984. Bustin' Ghosts was making people feel good, and for some reason someone named Frankie was keen we all relax. And an all-powerful being with a man perm had decided to gather up a bunch of Earth's heroes and villains to put them on a battle planet and make them fight in one of the first major crossover events for Marvel Comics, Secret Wars. Secret Wars was meant to be a battle royale with the top heroes and villains from across the Marvel Universe, teaming up and fighting folks they wouldn't normally run into. It was also a moment in the sun for the most reluctant but ultimately powerful villain Molecule Man, who tried to bring the whole thing to a close by dropping a mountain on the heroes, only to find out that the Hulk really could lift a mountain. Far from home, Spidey's suits was taking a beating and was approaching immodesty. That's when Thor and Hulk directed Peter to the Good Guy Base's gift shop, a sort of lab that had a machine that could read your mind and produce the product you need. Only they didn't tell him which one. What Pete got was a new suit that would not only cover his shame, but could also resemble regular clothes when needed, allowing him to switch from Peter Parker to Spider-Man without having to abandon his clothes in a backpack in an alley. Bonus points, the suit generated a strong webbing, meaning that was one less thing that Parker had to worry about making. All of this seems like a win, but since this is a Marvel comic, anything this cool has to come at a pretty heavy cost. That cost was that the suit was a living being that was trying to bond permanently with Peter Parker. Not only that, but it liked the hero game so much, it was taking sleeping Peter Parker out on web-slinging adventures, thus ruining the whole point of sleeping in the first place. Richards helped Peter break up with his new suit, but his new suit was having none of it, and came right back. Finding out the suit was sensitive to sound and fire, Peter went to a cathedral bell and rang himself free of the symbiote. In a coincidence that could only come from comic books, it just so happened at the very time in that very church was a reporter named Eddie Brock, who just so happened to have a beef with Peter after he had debunked a Sin Eater story that Brock had written. A little of the symbiote's chocolate got in Eddie's peanut butter, and the two great tastes discovered they both had a great hate for a certain web-slinger and formed a new partnership as the villain Venom. As Venom, Brock had most of the spider powers, as well as bulking up, and of course the big mouth full of sharp teeth and a tongue that doesn't fit inside it. The symbiote's time with Peter meant that Venom didn't trigger Peter's Spidey sense, making him a menacing foe. For your run-of-the-mill super jerk, that might be all the story you need to set about a career to trying to take down Spider-Man.
You're gonna pay.
But Venom turned out to be no ordinary villain. And just as his adventures post-Parker grew, we also started to learn about his pre-Parker life, and how exactly he ended up on that lab on the Battle World. The origins of Venom's species, the Klintarians, dates all the way back to the earliest beings in the Marvel Universe. Null was created between the end of the previous universe and the birth of this one, and took dominion over the Void and became an avatar of Oblivion, the actual embodiment of the Void. What Null didn't like was the light, and how much of it this new universe was creating. Null's tantrum over the light ended up setting a lot of things in motion. He created All Black the Necro Sword and beheaded a Celestial to forge the weapon. The head eventually became Nowhere. Null was also caught killing a cruel god on an unforgiving planet by a being named Gore, who liked the idea of killing gods so much he became the God Butcher, which turned out to not be the guy who sold gods their ham hocks. After All Black got swiped, Null was left with some downtime, and started exploring exactly what godlike power could do. One of those things was to take the darkness he controlled and make a parasitic species that would bond with lesser species. Null had his new gooey creations form into dragons because Null has style, and he began invading planets until Thor laid the hammer down when the band came to Earth early in Earth's history. De-dragoning, the individual symbiotes needed something to bond to, and they ended up bonding with noble peeps, instilling in them that sense of nobility. Finding themselves at odds with their creator, now they imprisoned him, and named the planet and themselves Cage, Klyntar. So if the Klyntar had retired to live the hippie peace-loving life of a ball of goo containing all their conquering creator, how did Venom break so bad? While the Klintarians were doing some heavy rebranding, they also formed the Agents of the Cosmos, because you're nobody in the Marvel Universe until you're an agent of something. That was both a way to make amends for being Null's weapon of destruction, and a way to get the symbiote host they needed. But the host needed to be the best of the best, or the symbiote would be corrupted all over again. Eventually, a thrill-seeking host-destroying offshoot of the Klintarians formed. Around this time is when a symbiote was acquired by the Kree and experimented on to become a weapon against the Kree's longtime shape-shifting enemy, the Skrulls. A Kree named Tel-Kar bonded with the symbiote until having to separate during a rescue mission, wiping the symbiote's memory. Its next host used the symbiote power to wipe out its own species. The symbiote, who would later be known as Venom, retained its desire to protect its host instead from the Kree, but a super hardcore murder streak from the other host. And so the Klyntar contained him to keep him from contaminating the collective. That's how the Klintarian, who would become Venom, found himself on the Battle World and accidentally fulfilling Peter's wish. Eddie Brock, Tel-Kar, and Peter Parker weren't the only ones to form an intimate bond with the Venom symbiote. By now it'd be easier to find all the characters he hasn't bonded with. His first venture was to find someone he thought was better suited to bringing the pain to Spider-Man in the form of Mac Gargan, better known as the Scorpion, or the guy in the post-credit scenes of Spider-Man Homecoming who wanted to know what Spider-Man's secret identity was.
You know, take a picture.
After a bit of a love triangle between Eddie, Venom, and Gargan, The symbiote wound up in the hands of the government who crafted it to former Peter Parker bully and current US war hero Flash Thompson, who had lost his legs while in the military. Since no one on Earth's experience with the Venom symbiote had been pleasant, Captain America sent the new Agent Venom into space as a liaison with the Guardians of the Galaxy, where they found out that the galaxy wasn't fond of symbiotes either. After a whirlwind tour of possessing the Guardians, Venom found his way home where people tried to set him right, even having Agent Venom join the Agents of the Cosmos, only to have Venom corrupted again. It turns out that there was a piece of his tongue out there with a hallmark on it that had become mania. Thompson was able to keep the Klintarians from killing Venom and took the two of them back to Earth. Spider-Man was having none of Venom being on Earth and separated Flash and Venom, only for Venom to reveal his unknown history, but also that he didn't remember Peter. Between being a menace, an anti-hero, and the defender of the cosmos, Venom is also a proud papa. Well, not proud. He has frequently tried to kill his offspring. Not everyone is cut out for fatherhood. The most famous of his offspring was left over when he broke Eddie Brock out of jail. That little bit bonded with Brock's cellmate, a serial killer named Cletus Cassidy. Having met the one person more murderous than a corrupted Klyntarian, the pair became known as Carnage. The Life Foundation found out that the Venom symbiote could reproduce asexually and thought, don't mind if I do, kidnapping Brock and forcibly separating him from the Venom symbiote in order to force him to create 5 new offspring. That included Riot, Lasher, Phage, Agony, and Scream. Kinda sounds like the name list for your brother's dark metal band, huh? Instead, they were the Life Foundation's Guardian Force. Eventually, Null would invade Earth for a second time, merging 4 of the 5 to go after Scream when the Avengers eventually dispersed them. They'll be back. Everyone always comes back. A student of Thompson's ended up getting a bit of Venom tongue on her, creating a symbiote known as Mania, who served as a sidekick for Agent Venom until he went out to space and the student, Andrea Benton, started to succumb to the symbiote's angrier side before Lee Price stole it. That guy's a real jerk. Venom would have a 7th offspring that he would try to keep on the down low with Eddie Brock. Eventually, Telkar returned, hoping to use his old symbiote supersuit. Shenanigans ensued, and the sleeper symbiote borked Telkar's brain and took him on a ride through the cosmos.
As Venom 2 races toward theaters, there's really only one question on everyone's mind. Will Tom Hardy still be super sweaty in the sequel? And the other big question is whether Tom Holland's Spider-Man will make an appearance in the film. There's only been hints and teases that the webhead will show up, but it's clear that everyone involved wants to make that happen. And because Eddie Brock is about to face one of the most dangerous comic book villains ever, a Spider-Man and Venom team-up makes sense. Today, we're talking about the potential Spider-Man and Venom team-up, so let's get into it right now. Although Eddie Brock and his BFF symbiote faced a pretty tough challenge in Riot at the end of the first movie, we all knew there was a bigger threat out there. Because you can't really set up a Venom franchise without eventually getting to his greatest nemesis. The destructive force of evil known as Carnage is one of the worst villains in all of comics history. And thanks to a tease at the end of Venom, we know he'll be back to cause trouble in the sequel, while looking a lot like Woody Harrelson. Just describing Carnage should be enough to give you nightmares. In the comics, the crazy serial killer known as Cletus Cassidy was cellmates with Eddie Brock. Once the Venom symbiote came to break Eddie out, a piece of it was left behind and merged with Cletus. Now, in the comics, Eddie Brock wasn't the greatest guy, but he was a straight-up saint compared to Cletus Cassidy. The wicked and vile things Cletus did are too graphic to describe in this video, but just believe us when we say that you don't want to run into him in a dark alleyway, or in a well-lit alleyway for that matter. He's a sociopathic, homicidal sadist who's probably really just mad because his name is Cletus. Now, since the live-action version of the movie sees Eddie Brock as more of a good guy than his comic book counterpart started out as, we don't expect the sequel to follow Carnage's origin story verbatim. Instead, it seems like Cletus is already fascinated with Eddie Brock as he's locked up, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that he probably won't stay locked up for long come the next movie. In terms of powers, Venom needs to watch out. Carnage is stronger than the anti-hero while also being able to shapeshift and use the symbiote to create a whole range of deadly weapons. There have been some versions out of the comics where Carnage can suck the life out of people by touching them, and for Venom's sake, we hope that's not carried over. And even with all this awesome power, the bad guy side gets even more stacked for the sequel, as it's been confirmed that Naomi Harris will be playing Shriek, a powerful supervillain who in the comics is Carnage's love interest. Talk about unfair, right? It's almost like Venom will need to to team up with someone in order to take down the pair of baddies, right? Well, who could that be? If you ask us, we sort of have the perfect candidate. Alright, full disclosure, we just want Tom Holland to be a major part of the Venom sequel, just so there would be two main actors named Tom. Can you imagine it? Director Andy Serkis would yell out, "Tom, I need you to act scarier," and both Tom Hardy and Tom Holland would look confused at one another, not knowing what to do. Classic comedy. Alright, fine, there might be better reasons to have Spider-Man be a part of Venom 2. For one thing, the Venom and Spider-Man relationship is just so great, and a partnership between the two deserves a proper team-up. And we are just dying to see how exactly a meeting between Tom Holland's Peter Parker and Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock would unfold. In the comics, Peter and Eddie are rival journalists, and Peter exposes him as a fraud. This, of course, leads Eddie down the path to merge with the symbiote that was originally attached to Spider-Man. Eddie, Peter, and the symbiote are forever linked to one another, and that's why comics Venom looks a lot like Spider-Man, except with more black and a lot of teeth. We have to admit, as cool as Venom looked on the big screen, it was weird seeing the character without the white spider on his chest. So since they changed Eddie's original origin story in a solo film, it creates a much more interesting dynamic for the two characters going forward. How would a meeting between Peter Parker and Eddie Brock work, given what we know about each character? Well, although Peter hasn't expressed much of an interest in journalism or photography, we know he's eventually on a path to become a photographer for the Daily Bugle, where he spends his days taking pictures of Spider-Man for the Spider-Man picture fanatic J. Jonah Jameson. Now, who knows? Maybe because they've already changed so much of Peter's normal comic arc, they won't have him become a photographer out in the real world. But if they did want to follow that, maybe a chance encounter with rock star journalist Eddie Brock would help nudge Peter in the right direction. It would definitely put a unique spin on the complex relationship the two usually have in the comics, because now a relatively younger Spider-Man has the chance to learn from the rugged and crusading anti-hero Eddie Brock. Talk about strange. But it's something that we are just dying to see in live action. And just look at all the school trips Peter's school goes on. They go to Washington, D.C. in Spider-Man Homecoming, and then Europe in Spider-Man Far From Home. And sure, it was revealed that Nick Fury was really the one orchestrating the class trip in a foreign country, which makes more sense, but the point still remains that these high school students get to travel a lot more than we ever did in high school. So what, you get dusted one time by Thanos, and then that magically grants these kids the right to travel around the world? We're not upset or anything, all we're saying is a quick trip to San Francisco wouldn't be out of the question. And who knows, maybe if it takes place in the same multiverse, Spider-Man can go to San Fran looking for Ant-Man. Or if they continue the narrative of Far From Home, maybe Spider-Man fled to San Francisco to hide out from the cops and clear his head a little bit to figure out what he's going to do about being framed for the whole Mysterio debacle. But why would these two need to team up anyway? Well, as mentioned, Carnage and Shriek will prove to be a frightening pair that Venom probably can't handle alone. Sure, we know Eddie has a great ally in Anne Wang, as evidenced by her awesome move of taking the symbiote and biting off some random goon's head with it, but if the symbiote sticks to Eddie, that leaves Anne without any powers. So it would be better to team up with someone who doesn't need a symbiote to function. But having said that, there would be something cool about having Anne Wang battling Shriek while Venom and Spider-Man team up to take on Carnage. Can't you just see Venom, Spider-Man, and Carnage all going at each other, zipping around, flinging different colored goo at one another? It would be great! On top of that, you have to look at the impact of what teaming up with Spider-Man would do for the Venom character overall. If he starts the movie reluctant to team up with anyone and is dedicated to going about things alone without help, but somehow Spider-Man convinces him to change his mind and work together at the end, that puts Eddie in the best position going forward in this young Sonyverse. Now he's more willing to team up or search for other special anti-heroes like him, and the obvious villain team-up Sony is clearly working toward can finally begin with Venom as its lead. And that's all thanks to Spider-Man. Eddie Brock is currently towing the line between anti-hero and hero, and we think both Spider-Man and Venom can learn from one another. Spider-Man can realize that sometimes you gotta break the rules if you want to fight for what's right, which is perfect and could inspire him to go back to New York to clear his name, while Venom can learn more about being a straight-up hero who needs to have a code of honor. The best team-ups are the ones where each character learns something from one another, and given where each character is at right now, the time is perfect for a team-up between the two comic icons. And it makes sense too. Not just because Carnage is so powerful, but because it both works on a story and a greater Sonyverse level. It certainly makes everything we heard from behind the scenes even more interesting. So overall, how likely is this to happen? Well, although there's been no direct confirmation, the powers in charge all seem to want to make it happen. Original Venom director Ruben Fleischer has said before that a Spider-Man and Venom crossover movie will definitely happen. And although he's handed over the reins of the franchise to Andy Serkis, we still believe that Venom and Spider-Man will meet up face to face in the sequel. And Fleischer wasn't the only creative mind teasing this epic confrontation. The writer of the first movie, Jeff Pinker, has also hinted at a Venom and Spider-Man team-up during an interview with Discussing Film. Clearly, the Venom side all want to find space for Spider-Man, and due to all the drama with the MCU, we feel now more than ever he's going to make an appearance in the Sonyverse. Just a little while ago, fans were shocked to hear about the Sony and Disney spat that ended with Spider-Man being removed from the MCU. Dark days indeed. It was almost unbelievable, but after about a month, the two companies seemed to smooth things over, and the webhead was allowed to remain in the MCU for one more solo film and an additional team-up movie. But it was Kevin Feige's comments that were really interesting. He seemed to tease that Spider-Man would be appearing in both the MCU and the relatively young Sonyverse. Maybe one of the stipulations Sony was able to work out with Disney was that Spider-Man could return to the MCU, but only if he could also make an appearance in Venom 2. If that's the case, then Sony did a great job negotiating. Spider-Man's future with the MCU is the biggest question mark. We know that he'll be in it for at least a little while longer to complete his character arc, because we'd really be living in an unjust world if the cliffhanger from Spider-Man Far From Home was never properly resolved. But after that's done, we see Sony wanting to bring the character over full-time into their universe. Before that can officially happen, Sony needs to prove that Spider-Man can fit in their villain world they're building. So having Peter Parker show up briefly in Venom 2 to help fight Carnage would not only be a major boost to Venom in general, but also test the waters in seeing how the character functions with their own characters. Think of it like a trial run, but a really awesome one that would make fans' heads explode. Overall, it's just too good an opportunity to pass up. That's why we think Venom and Spider-Man are definitely meeting in the sequel.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more updates on your favorite Marvel characters and stories. Stay tuned for more epic news from the MCU. Until next time, keep exploring the multiverse